If you want to predict how long someone will live, forget their cholesterol, forget their resting heart rate, forget the number of steps they hit on their fitness tracker every day. Look instead at how fast they walk across a room, because walking speed, the simple and assuming pace at which a person moves from one place to another, is one of the most powerful and consistent predictors of lifespan that medicine has ever identified. More predictive in many large studies than blood pressure alone, more predictive than BMI, more predictive in some populations than any single laboratory value in a standard blood panel. This is not a fringe finding from a single small study. It is a conclusion supported by decades of research across hundreds of thousands of participants in cohort studies from the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe, and Australia. And yet the number of adults who know that their walking pace is being watched by their biology as a readout of their systemic health is vanishingly small. Most people think of how fast they walk as a personality trait. You are either a fast walker or a slow one, and it has always been that way. What the science tells us is something fundamentally different. Walking speed is not a personality trait, it is a biological report card. And after the age of 50, it begins to change in ways that tell a very specific story about what is happening inside the body. The reason walking speed predicts longevity is not that slow walkers are somehow less determined or less motivated. It is that the act of walking at a normal, comfortable pace requires the coordinated function of an extraordinary number of biological systems simultaneously. The cardiovascular system supplying oxygen to working muscle, the neurological system coordinating balance and movement, the musculoskeletal system generating and absorbing force with every stride, the respiratory system matching ventilation to demand. When any one of these systems begins to falter, the walk slows. The pace is not causing the shortened lifespan. It is reflecting the underlying systemic health or the decline of it with a precision that most clinical tests cannot match. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what walking speed measures in the body, why it predicts death from causes that appear to have nothing to do with mobility, what drives the decline in gait speed that occurs with aging, and critically, what can be done to address it. Because walking speed is not fixed, it is modifiable, and the interventions that improve it are the same interventions that address the underlying biological decline it is measuring. Credential introduction. Hi, I am Dr. Alex. I am an emergency medicine doctor, and after nearly 10 years working on the front line in the AA-den-EE, I have seen what the late stages of systemic biological decline look like in real patients. The frail patient who moves slowly, cautiously, with visible effort, and who goes on to have a poor outcome not just from the condition that brought them in, but from the cumulative burden of the physiological deterioration that slow gait reflects. I have also seen the opposite, the 70-year-old who moves with purpose and fluency, whose recovery from acute illness is faster and more complete, whose body clearly has reserves that the clinical numbers alone do not fully capture. My goal is to help people understand what these observable markers actually mean so they can act on them long before they become a clinical emergency. If you are watching this video, you are probably someone who pays attention to their health and wants to understand it at a level that goes beyond the standard advice. And I want to make you a genuine promise. I will keep creating the most evidence-based, practically useful videos I can, grounded in real science and real clinical experience to help you live to longer and to understand your body well enough to do something meaningful about what is happening inside it. All I ask in return is that you give this channel a fair chance and hit the subscribe button. If you reach the end of this video and have not learned something genuinely new, feel free to unsubscribe. No hard feelings at all. But if you give me your time and attention, I will give you everything I have learned from more than a decade in medicine. Please hit the subscribe button and help this channel reach more people who need this information. And let us continue. The relationship between walking speed and longevity entered the medical literature with particular force following a landmark meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2011. That analysis pooled data from 9 large cohort studies involving nearly 35,000 community-dwelling adults aged 65 and over, followed for periods of up to 21 years. The findings were striking. Gait speed measured over a standardized short distance in a clinical setting was a strong predictor of survival across every subgroup examined. Adults walking at 1 meter per second or faster had significantly better survival outcomes than those walking slower. For every additional 0.1 meters per second of walking speed, the risk of death over the follow-up period fell in a consistent dose-dependent relationship. Crucially, gait speed predicted survival independently of age, sex, chronic disease diagnoses, body mass index, and cognitive status. It was not simply a proxy for being younger or thinner or less ill. It was providing information about biological health that those other variables did not fully account for. The researchers concluded that gait speed contains as much prognostic information as a combination of age, sex, chronic conditions, smoking history, blood pressure, body mass index, and hospitalization history combined. A single measurement of how fast a person walks across a room was as informative for predicting their remaining lifespan as a comprehensive medical history. That finding did not emerge from a single study in isolation. It has been replicated, extended, and reinforced by subsequent research across multiple continents and multiple decades. It is one of the most robust findings in the gerontology literature. A further study published in the British Medical Journal examined walking speed in midlife, specifically in adults in their 40s and 50s, and found that the predictive relationship held decades earlier than previously recognized. Adults in their mid-40s with slower habitual walking speeds showed evidence of accelerated biological aging across multiple physiological systems, faster lung function decline, worse cardiovascular fitness, greater cognitive test score reductions over time, and even measurable differences in brain structure on imaging. Walking pace in middle age was not simply reflecting existing illness, it was tracking the rate at which the body was accumulating biological age, the underlying wear and tear that eventually determines when systems begin to fail. Part B, what walking speed actually measures. To understand why walking speed is such a powerful predictor, it helps to think carefully about what the act of normal walking actually demands of the body. A comfortable walking pace, the speed at which most people naturally move when crossing a car park or walking through a supermarket, is not a simple or low-demand activity. It requires a continuous, coordinated integration of multiple biological systems operating simultaneously and in real time. The first system is cardiovascular. Walking at a comfortable pace requires the heart to sustain a cardiac output sufficient to deliver oxygenated blood to the working leg muscles throughout the duration of the walk. The arteries supplying those muscles must be capable of dilating appropriately to accommodate the increased flow. The heart rate must respond with appropriate flexibility to the changing demand. Any impairment in cardiac function, arterial elasticity, or autonomic heart rate regulation reduces the efficiency of this oxygen delivery, and the body responds by reducing the pace at which it chooses to operate, minimizing the mismatch between demand and supply. The second system is neurological. Every stride involves a complex sequence of motor commands from the brain's motor cortex, coordinated through the cerebellum, transmitted via the spinal cord, and executed by the peripheral nerves supplying the leg muscles. Balance is continuously maintained through the integration of inputs from the vestibular system in the inner ear, the visual system, and the proprioceptive sensors in the joints and muscles that report the body's position in space. Any degradation in this neurological network through white matter changes in the brain, peripheral neuropathy, vestibular dysfunction, or the early cognitive changes associated with neurodegeneration is reflected in a slowing of gait. The brain quite literally walks more cautiously when its processing capacity or its neural integrity is compromised. Gait speed is a readout of the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the musculoskeletal system, and the respiratory system, all expressed in a single number that requires no laboratory equipment to obtain. The third system is musculoskeletal. Normal walking speed requires adequate muscle strength in the hip extensors, the knee extensors and flexors, and the ankle plantar flexors, the calf muscles that provide the propulsive push-off that drives each stride forward. As sarcopenia progresses, the age-related loss of muscle mass and function described in detail in previous research, the propulsive force available at each stride diminishes. Step length shortens, cadence may compensate partially, but overall pace falls. The connection between walking speed and muscle mass is direct and measurable. Research published in the Journal of Gerontology has demonstrated that leg muscle power, specifically the rate at which force can be generated, not merely the maximum force achievable, is the strongest musculoskeletal predictor of habitual walking speed in older adults. The fourth system is metabolic and respiratory. Walking consumes oxygen at a rate that rises with pace. In a metabolically healthy individual with adequate lung function and efficient oxygen utilization in the muscle mitochondria, this demand is met comfortably at normal walking speeds. In an individual with reduced aerobic capacity, whether due to cardiovascular disease, chronic lung disease, metabolic inefficiency, or the general mitochondrial decline associated with sedentary aging, the metabolic cost of walking at a given pace is higher. The system approaches its limits sooner, and the body self-selects a slower pace as a physiological self-protection mechanism. What becomes clear from this systems-level analysis is that walking speed is a composite measure. It integrates the function of every major organ system into a single observable output. When the cardiovascular system is healthy, the neurological system is intact, the musculoskeletal system is strong, and the metabolic system is efficient, the walk is brisk. When any of those systems deteriorates, the walk slows. This is why gait speed predicts death from causes as diverse as heart attack, stroke, pneumonia, cancer, and dementia, because all of those conditions share common upstream mechanisms that also impair the biological systems walking speed depends on. Just a brief note, if you are finding this useful so far, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It genuinely helps these videos reach more people who could benefit from this information. Now, let us carry on. Naming the mechanisms. So let me name what is actually driving the decline in walking speed that occurs from midlife onwards, because it is not simply aging in the abstract. It is a specific set of biological processes that, when they occur together, produce a cascade of physiological deterioration that shows up first and most visibly in the way a person moves through the world. And these processes are not inevitable. They are, to a significant degree, the consequence of how modern life is structured, and they are addressable. The primary driver is the loss of what researchers call physical reserve, the cumulative biological capital represented by cardiovascular fitness, muscle mass and power, neurological processing speed, and metabolic efficiency. Physical reserve is not a fixed endowment. It is built over a lifetime by the repeated demands placed on biological systems, and it is eroded when those demands are removed. In the vast majority of adults over 50 in the developed world, physical reserve is being depleted faster than it is being replenished, not because of disease, but because of the structural absence of the physical demands that maintain it. The cardiovascular component of this decline is particularly consequential. Maximal aerobic capacity, VO2 max, the maximum rate at which the cardiovascular and respiratory systems can deliver and utilize oxygen during exercise, declines at approximately 1% per year from the age of 30 in sedentary adults. By 60, a sedentary person may have lost 30% of the aerobic capacity they had at 30. By 70, that loss may reach 40% or more. This matters for walking speed because aerobic capacity determines the physiological headroom available above the metabolic demands of normal walking. When aerobic capacity is high, comfortable walking pace sits well within the body's operational range. When it has been halved by decades of inactivity, comfortable walking pace approaches a meaningful proportion of maximum capacity, and the body responds by slowing down. A slow walking pace is often the first external sign that the cardiovascular headroom available for everyday physical activity has shrunk to the point where the body is operating near its ceiling, rather than well within it. The neurological component is equally important and equally underappreciated. Walking speed in older adults is significantly correlated with white matter integrity in the brain, the health of the myelin-coated nerve fibers that allow rapid communication between brain regions. Research published in neurology has demonstrated that white matter lesions, the small areas of disrupted neural connectivity that accumulate with age, hypertension, diabetes, and vascular disease, are directly associated with slower gait speed, independent of muscular strength. The brain that processes more slowly also walks more slowly. This neurological dimension of gait decline explains why walking speed predicts cognitive decline and dementia risk. The same vascular and metabolic processes that impair white matter integrity, slow neural processing, also slow the walk. The muscle power component adds a third dimension. As described previously, sarcopenia removes the fast-twitch muscle fibers that generate rapid force, the fibers responsible not just for explosive movement, but for the propulsive push-off at each stride that maintains walking pace. As these fibers are lost, step length shortens, stride becomes less dynamic, and the walk takes on the characteristic shortened, shuffling quality that clinicians associate with frailty. This is not aesthetic. The loss of stride length and propulsive power reflects a genuine reduction in the musculoskeletal capacity to generate the mechanical output that walking requires. There are specific daily life patterns that accelerate this triple decline: cardiovascular, neurological, and musculoskeletal, in ways that are so common in adults over 50 that they have become effectively invisible through sheer prevalence. The most consequential is prolonged daily sitting. Research published in the Annals of Internal Medicine has demonstrated that total sitting time is an independent predictor of all-cause mortality, even after controlling for time spent in moderate to vigorous physical activity. Adults who sit for more than 8 hours per day, a description that encompasses the majority of office workers, retirees who watch television extensively, and anyone whose leisure time is predominantly sedentary, show accelerated cardiovascular deconditioning, more rapid muscle fiber atrophy, and faster neurological processing decline than matched peers who interrupt sitting with regular physical breaks. The walk slows because the body is spending the majority of its waking hours in a state that removes every demand that maintains the system's walking depends on. The second pattern is the assumption that walking for exercise is sufficient to maintain all the physical systems that walking speed reflects. Walking is beneficial. It maintains some cardiovascular fitness. It does not challenge the musculoskeletal system sufficiently to maintain fast twitch muscle fiber density or the explosive leg power that generates stride propulsion. A person who walks 30 minutes every day but does no resistance training is maintaining one of the 3 systems that walking speed reflects while allowing the other 2 to decline unaddressed. Their walk will slow not as fast as a fully sedentary person's, but significantly faster than someone who addresses all 3 systems. This is not a reflection of personal inadequacy. The public health message around physical activity in midlife has focused heavily on cardiovascular exercise, steps per day, moderate intensity activity, without adequately communicating the specific need to maintain muscle power and neurological processing speed through different forms of exercise. Adults who have followed that advice faithfully may find in their 60s that their walking pace has slowed in ways they cannot account for. They have been doing what they were told. The advice was incomplete, practical, mechanism-based actions. So what actually moves gait speed in the right direction? I want to be precise here, because the answer is more specific than simply walking more, and the specificity matters for the result. The 3 biological systems that determine walking speed each require a different type of intervention, and all 3 need to be addressed simultaneously for the full effect. Addressing one while neglecting the others produces partial results at best. The first intervention is deliberate cardiovascular conditioning, specifically exercise performed at an intensity sufficient to drive meaningful cardiovascular adaptation. Walking at a comfortable pace maintains some baseline fitness, but does not produce the cardiovascular improvements that reverse the VO2 max decline of aging. To drive aerobic adaptation, to genuinely improve the heart stroke volume, the arterial system's capacity to deliver blood to working muscle, and the muscle mitochondria's ability to utilize oxygen efficiently, the cardiovascular system needs to be challenged at intensities above its comfortable operating range. This means brisk walking at a pace that raises the heart rate meaningfully and produces noticeable breathlessness, or cycling, swimming, or any other sustained aerobic activity that challenges the system. Research published in the Journal of Applied Physiology has demonstrated that regular vigorous intensity aerobic exercise in adults over 60 can partially reverse the age-related decline in VO2 max, not merely slow it, but genuinely recover some of the cardiovascular headroom that had been lost. The practical target is 3 to 4 sessions per week of 30 to 40 minutes at an intensity that feels genuinely challenging. Think of cardiovascular conditioning as widening the pipe that supplies every biological system in the body. A wider pipe means more oxygen delivered, more metabolic waste cleared, and more capacity available for everything the body needs to do. The second intervention is resistance training targeted specifically at the lower body muscle groups that generate walking speed: the hip extensors, knee extensors, and ankle plantar flexors. The specific training quality that matters most for gait speed is not maximal strength, the ability to lift the heaviest possible weight, but power, the ability to generate force rapidly. Research published in the Journal of Gerontology has shown that power training, resistance exercise performed with the intent to move a moderate load as explosively as possible, produce greater improvements in walking speed than traditional slow, controlled strength training because it specifically targets the fast twitch fiber recruitment patterns and neural firing rate that generate propulsive stride. Practical examples include step-ups performed with deliberate speed, leg press with explosive effort, heel raises performed quickly rather than slowly, and stair climbing at pace. 2 to 3 sessions per week, with progressive increases in load over time, are sufficient to produce measurable improvements in leg power and walking speed within 8 to 12 weeks. The third intervention is what exercise physiologists call incidental physical activity, the pattern of movement embedded in the ordinary structure of the day, as distinct from formal exercise sessions. Research consistently shows that prolonged uninterrupted sitting accelerates the physiological decline in every system that gait speed reflects. Breaking sitting time with 5 to 10 minutes of light movement every hour standing, walking to another room, doing a brief set of bodyweight exercises maintains the baseline neuromuscular and cardiovascular activation that prevents the rapid deconditioning that occurs during extended sedentary periods. This is not a substitute for formal exercise. It is the background metabolic environment within which formal exercise occurs, and without it, the gains from structured training are partially offset by the deconditioning of extended daily sitting. The fourth consideration is the neurological dimension of gait, specifically the balance and proprioception training that maintains the neural systems responsible for stable, confident walking. Balance exercises, standing on one leg, heel to toe walking along a line, exercises performed on slightly unstable surfaces challenge the vestibular, visual, and proprioceptive integration that underpins confident and efficient gait. Research published in Age and Aging has demonstrated that structured balance training in adults over 60 reduces fall risk significantly and is associated with improvements in habitual walking speed. Because a person whose balance system is trained and confident moves faster than one who is unconsciously bracing against the possibility of a misstep. This does not require specialized equipment. A daily 5-minute balance routine, standing on one leg while doing another task, for example, produces measurable neurological adaptation over weeks to months. I want to note clearly, if you have existing cardiovascular disease, have been advised to limit physical exertion, or have joint conditions that affect your ability to exercise safely, please discuss any significant change to your exercise program with your own doctor before beginning. The principles I have described apply to generally healthy adults, and personalized medical guidance always takes precedence over general recommendations. What I can say is that in the vast majority of cases, the clinical evidence strongly supports exercise as beneficial even in the presence of most chronic conditions, and that the risks of inactivity in adults over 50 significantly outweigh the risks of appropriately managed physical activity. Let me bring this back to the clinical reality I observe. Because the predictive value of gait speed becomes very tangible when you work in an environment where the consequences of physical decline are acutely visible. One of the most reliable informal assessments available in an emergency department, and one that experienced clinicians use instinctively, often without consciously articulating it, is watching how a patient moves when they arrive and when they walk to and from assessments. A patient who moves briskly with good postural control and confident stride is almost always a patient who is going to have a better outcome from whatever has brought them in, regardless of their age on the chart. A patient who shuffles, who needs the wall for support, who pauses and braces before each step, is a patient whose biological reserve is telling you something important before a single blood test has been run. What is equally telling is the trajectory I observe in patients who are reviewed over months. Those who attend follow-up appointments with a noticeably brisker pace than at their previous visit are almost invariably reporting improvements across multiple health domains simultaneously: better energy, better sleep, improved mood, fewer infections, better glycemic control if they have diabetes. The walk is not improving because those other things have improved. The walk and the other things are improving together because the underlying biological systems they all depend on are recovering in parallel. That co-movement is not coincidental, it is the signature of systemic biological improvement. Part B, the bigger picture. Walking speed matters, not just as a predictor of mortality, but as something more accessible and more immediately actionable than almost any clinical metric available to medicine. It requires no laboratory, no equipment, no appointment, and no specialist. It can be assessed by anyone, anywhere, at any time. And unlike many clinical markers, cholesterol levels, blood pressure, HbA1c, it integrates the function of multiple biological systems simultaneously, providing a composite picture of systemic health that no single biomarker can match. Research published in PLOS Medicine followed a large cohort of adults from midlife to old age and found that self-reported walking pace, simply asking people whether they considered themselves slow, average, or brisk walkers, predicted life expectancy differences of up to 15 years between the slowest and fastest groups. 15 years of life expectancy predicted by a single self-reported question about how fast a person walks. That is a more powerful predictor than smoking status in some analyses. It is a more powerful predictor than obesity, and it is a predictor that responds to intervention because the biological systems it reflects respond to the right inputs at every age. What this tells us is that gait speed is not just a measurement of how old the body is. It is a measurement of how well the body has been maintained and how much biological capital remains available for the decades ahead. A 70-year-old who walks briskly has, in a biological sense, more in common with a healthy 55-year-old than with a sedentary peer of their own chronological age. The biology does not know how many years have passed. It knows what demands have been placed on it, what inputs have been provided, and what condition the systems are currently in. Walking speed is the summary statistic for all of that. So let us bring this full circle. A slowing walking pace after 50 is not simply what getting older feels like. It is a biological signal, a readout from the cardiovascular, neurological, musculoskeletal, and metabolic systems simultaneously, that the physical reserve underpinning them is being depleted faster than it is being replenished. That is not an inevitable consequence of the years passing. It is a consequence of how those years have been lived, specifically of the absence of the physical demands that maintain the system's walking speed depends on. And it is not irreversible. The interventions that improve walking speed are not complicated. Cardiovascular conditioning at a genuine intensity, 2 to 3 times per week. Lower body power training, specifically targeting the explosive leg strength that generates stride propulsion. Regular interruption of sitting throughout the day to prevent the continuous deconditioning that extended sedentary time produces. And balance training to maintain the neural confidence that allows a person to move through the world at their biological capacity rather than below it. Each of these addresses one of the systems that walking speed reflects. Together they address the biological aging process itself, not as a cosmetic intervention, but as a direct investment in the cardiovascular headroom, the neurological integrity, and the muscular power that determine quality and duration of life. The next time you walk across a room, or through a car park, or along a street, pay attention to your pace, not as a source of anxiety, but as information. Your body has been producing that readout your entire life. Now you understand what it means. If you found this video useful, please do subscribe to the channel and help this information reach as many people as possible.